Have you ever had the strange feeling of reliving the exact same moment for the second time, even knowing deep down that it's impossible? For a few seconds, everything seems out of place. The environment is the same, the people are there, the words sound too familiar, and then comes that silent shiver as if time had taken a small leap backward. The heart races, the mind tries to understand but finds no answers. It's as if the brain pressed the repeat button without asking permission. Perhaps this has already happened to you in a simple conversation, walking down the street, watching an ordinary everyday scene. Suddenly, an uncomfortable certainty arises that you have experienced this before. It's not just a vague impression. It's a strong, almost disconcerting conviction. The feeling is so real that it makes you want to predict what will happen in the next few seconds. And when that moment passes, that question echoes, "What just happened to me?" This phenomenon has a well-known name, but the experience itself remains intriguing. Déjà vu doesn't arrive without warning, doesn't ask permission, and doesn't explain anything. It simply happens. That's why so many people describe this moment as if time has stopped, or as if the mind has crossed an invisible rift between the present and something that seems to come from the past. And the most curious thing is that, despite being so common, few people truly understand what lies behind this intense sensation. Have you ever experienced this? Have you ever felt that subtle, almost silent discomfort that makes you question whether your brain is really interpreting reality correctly? That's exactly where the mystery lies. Because déjà vu isn't just a strange everyday curiosity. It touches on something much deeper. The way the brain constructs our perception of the world, organizes memory, and decides in fractions of a second what is new and what is familiar. What makes it even more fascinating is the fact that this sensation doesn't occur in dreams, nor in extreme altered states. It arises in completely ordinary moments when we are awake, conscious, and attentive. This makes the impact even greater. After all, if the brain is capable of creating such a convincing sensation of repetition, what else might it be interpreting inaccurately without us realizing it? Stay with me until the end of this video because what you're about to discover might surprise you. Déjà vu isn't a simple mistake, nor a gross mental glitch. It's a subtle sign of how the brain works all the time behind the scenes, processing information, cross-referencing data, making decisions too fast for consciousness to keep up with. And, in some rare moments, this extremely sophisticated system seems to stumble over itself. Perhaps you've already heard mystical, spiritual, or even supernatural explanations about déjà vu. Maybe someone has said it's a memory from another life, a warning from the future, or an inexplicable coincidence. But before accepting any ready-made explanation, it's worth looking inside your own mind. Because the answer, however perplexing it may be, lies in the workings of the human brain, that incredible organ that creates our reality moment by moment. As you listen to these words, your brain is organizing sounds, meanings, emotions, and memories simultaneously. It does this so efficiently that you rarely notice the effort involved. But déjà vu arises precisely when this process, for a brief moment, goes off track. And it is exactly this small deviation that transforms an ordinary moment into an experience impossible to ignore. Now, before we go any further, consider this. If your brain can make the present seem like the past, what does that say about the confidence you place in your own perceptions? It's from this question that the story begins to get really interesting. If this topic resonates with you, if you've ever felt that silent strangeness of déjà vu, leave a comment below. Share what you experienced, what you felt in that moment, or even what went through your mind afterward. Sometimes, someone's experience helps another person better understand their own, and it's precisely this kind of exchange that transforms this space into something alive, human, and real. If, while listening to all of this, you realized that this content captivated you, sparked your curiosity, or made you look at your own mind in a different way, consider liking the video. This simple gesture shows YouTube that this type of reflection deserves to continue reaching more people who also question how the brain works and how our perception can be deceived without warning. And if you feel you want to continue exploring these mysteries of the brain, memory, and reality with me, subscribe to the channel. Each new subscription is a sign that it's worthwhile to continue delving deeper into these topics, investigating what happens behind the strange sensations that every human being has experienced, but almost no one stops to truly understand. Your participation here is what sustains this content. It's what allows these questions to continue being asked, explored, and shared. And now that you've felt this curious discomfort forming, it's time to delve a little deeper. Because what happens inside the brain during déjà vu is even more surprising than it seems at first glance. When science looks at déjà vu, it does something very different from what common sense usually does. Instead of searching for hidden meanings in time, predictions of the future, or mysterious memories of the past, it turns inside the brain and asks something much more direct. What exactly is happening behind the scenes of the mind when this sensation arises? The term déjà vu itself, which comes from French and literally means already seen, describes only the subjective experience, not the cause. And that's precisely where many people get confused, because feeling that something has already happened does not mean, on any scientific level, that it actually happened before. According to neuroscience, déjà vu is not a real memory. It doesn't come from a file stored in the brain that was accidentally reopened, nor from a forgotten memory that reappeared. What exists is an intense feeling of familiarity without a concrete origin. It's as if the brain fires a signal saying this is known, even when there is no true memory associated with that moment. This distinction is fundamental because it completely changes how we understand the phenomenon. We are not talking about remembering but about feeling that we remember. The human brain is constantly classifying experiences. Every sound, every image, every conversation goes through systems that evaluate whether it is new, repetitive, relevant, or disposable. This process is fast, automatic, and invisible to consciousness. Most of the decisions you make throughout the day, from crossing the street to interpreting a facial expression, happen without you needing to think about it. Déjà vu arises precisely when this sophisticated system produces a response that does not correspond to the objective reality of the moment. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because understanding it requires dismantling a very common idea, that the brain functions like a camera, recording everything exactly as it happened. In practice, the brain is much more like an editor than a recorder. It interprets, reorganizes, simplifies, and reconstructs information all the time. Memory is not a static file. It is an active, dynamic, and often flawed process. And this flaw is not a defect. It is part of how the human mind deals with the excess of stimuli in the world. Within this process there's something called familiarity. It's a quick, almost automatic sensation that helps the brain decide whether something deserves special attention or not. When you enter a familiar place, you don't need to analyze every detail to know you've been there before. The brain simply signals this familiarity and moves on. In déjà vu, this signal is activated without the presence of a corresponding memory. The result is this strange collision between certainty and confusion, between recognition and doubt. That's why science makes it clear. Déjà vu is not a prediction of the future. It doesn't indicate that you are experiencing something that will happen again. Nor is it evidence that time bends or that there is a hidden truth escaping logic. What exists is a momentary mismatch between brain systems that normally work in perfect harmony. A small delay, a processing out of order, and the mind creates a narrative that seems absolutely real. This point is important because it reveals something bigger about our mental journey. We often believe that we perceive the world in a direct, objective, and faithful way. But science shows that what we call reality passes, first and foremost, through internal filters. The brain constructs a version of the world based on probabilities, past experiences, and quick decisions. Déjà vu is just a rare moment when we manage to perceive this mechanism working imperfectly. When you experience déjà vu, the emotional impact stems precisely from this break in trust. For a few seconds, what seems solid, your perception of time, memory, the sequence of events, becomes unstable. This generates discomfort, curiosity, and, in many people, even a feeling of revelation. As if something behind the scenes had been exposed without warning. And perhaps that's exactly what makes the phenomenon so fascinating. It shows that we are not always in control of how we interpret the present. Science doesn't treat this event as something supernatural, but it doesn't minimize it either. On the contrary, déjà vu is seen as a valuable clue about how the brain makes decisions, constructs meaning, and sustains the feeling of continuity in life. It reveals that the mind is constantly working to maintain a coherent narrative, and that, occasionally, this narrative may present small cracks. And it is from these cracks that even deeper questions arise about consciousness, identity, choices, and impact. If the brain can generate such a convincing sensation without a real basis, how many other certainties in daily life are also momentary constructs? To what extent are our decisions guided by automatic interpretations that we never question? These questions are not uncomfortable by chance. They are part of a silent transformation in how we understand the human mind. As you reflect on this, you might realize that déjà vu ceases to be merely a strange phenomenon and becomes an invitation to observation. An invitation to look more closely at the inner workings of your own experience. Because the more we understand how the brain creates meaning, the more aware we become of the internal journey that happens every second, even when we think everything is under control. And before moving on, leave a simple sign here that this resonated with you. Comment below, "That makes sense to me." To understand how the brain decides what is new and what is familiar, we need to slightly change how we imagine the mind works. Most people believe that we first see the world and then think about it. But, in practice, the brain is always one step ahead, making quick, automatic and silent judgments about everything that happens around us. Even before you consciously perceive a scene, a conversation, or an environment, your brain has already begun to classify them. It needs to do this because without this constant filtering, reality would be too chaotic to bear. Every stimulus that reaches you, an image, a sound, a smell, a word, undergoes a kind of internal screening. In fractions of a second, the brain compares it to previous experiences, known patterns, and similar context. If it finds something that fits, it triggers a feeling of familiarity. If it doesn't find anything, it marks it as new. This process is so fast that you rarely realize it has happened. To your consciousness, the sensation simply arises ready-made as if it had always been there. The most interesting point is that this decision doesn't depend on a single part of the brain. It arises from communication between different areas working together, almost like an extremely synchronized team. Some regions analyze environmental details, others evaluate emotions, others compare with past memories. All of this happens simultaneously, behind the scenes, without you needing to give any conscious command. It's an impressive mechanism that works thousands of times a day without fail, until the moment it does. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because this classification between new and familiar isn't just technical. It has a direct impact on how you make decisions and build your own mindset. When something seems familiar, the brain relaxes. It understands that there's no immediate danger, that there's no need to expend so much energy analyzing every detail. When something is new, the state changes. Attention increases, vigilance grows, and the body prepares to react. This subtle difference influences choices, emotional reactions, and even how you position yourself in the world. Déjà vu arises precisely when this classification system short-circuits. Not because the brain is broken, but because it works with probabilities, not absolute certainties. Sometimes, a new scenario shares enough elements with past experiences to activate the familiarity signal, even without a real memory associated with that moment. A similar type of lighting, a conversation with a similar rhythm, a combination of sounds and images, all of this can fool the system for a brief instant. What's most intriguing is that the brain doesn't warn you when this happens. It doesn't say, maybe this is familiar. It affirms it. The feeling comes loaded with conviction as if it were an absolute truth. And that's where the emotional impact appears. Because the human mind deeply trusts these internal signals. They have been shaped over thousands of years of evolution to keep us alive, alert, and efficient. Questioning this feeling requires effort, and even then it continues to seem real. This mechanism reveals a hidden truth about our mental journey. Much of what we call certainty arises from automatic processes that never pass through the sieve of conscious reflection. The brain decides first, and only then does consciousness try to explain what it felt. In the case of déjà vu, this explanation doesn't come, and the void left by it generates strangeness. It's like realizing for a moment that there's much more happening behind the decisions than we'd like to admit. When you understand this, something begins to change in the way you observe your own mind. Déjà vu ceases to be merely a curious phenomenon and becomes a sign of how perception can be shaped, distorted, and reinterpreted in real time. It shows that familiarity is not proof of truth, but a constructed sensation. And this has a profound impact when we think about memory, identity, and even how we deal with significant life experiences. This revelation is not uncomfortable by chance. It touches on something essential, the idea of control. We like to believe that we master our perceptions, that we know exactly what we are experiencing and why. But the brain operates on a different logic. It prioritizes efficiency, not absolute precision. And most of the time this works perfectly. The problem is that, when we perceive a flaw, even a minimal one, it draws attention precisely because it shatters this illusion of control. By observing how the brain decides what is new and what is familiar, we begin to understand that the reality we live in is, to a large extent, a functional construct. It serves to guide us, protect us, and facilitate quick choices. Déjà vu emerges as a small crack in this construct, a moment when what's behind the scenes becomes visible. And when that happens, the feeling is not just strange, it's revealing. This understanding opens the door to a silent transformation in how you perceive your own experience. Instead of trying to push away déjà vu or explain it simplistically, it's possible to use it as an invitation to curiosity. A reminder that the human mind is incredibly powerful, but also profoundly complex. And the closer we get to these inner workings, the more we realize there is still so much to be discovered. If all of this resonated with you in any way, write a simple sentence in the comments. I'm on this journey too. When we talk about the neural error behind déjà vu, it's important to adjust how the word error is understood. It's not about something broken, defective, or dangerous. The human brain is a living, adaptive system that operates with margins of adjustment all the time. It doesn't operate like a rigid machine, but like an organism that interprets signals at high speed. And, in very rare moments, this interpretation can deviate slightly from the expected alignment. That's exactly where déjà vu is born. The heart of the phenomenon lies in a slight temporal discrepancy. The brain registers the world in stages. First it captures the stimulus, then processes it, compares it with previous experiences, and finally decides how to label it. All of this happens in milliseconds. The sensation of the present only exists because these stages usually function in a synchronized way. But when one of them is slightly ahead or behind, the result can be surprising. The present is interpreted as if it had already happened. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because this momentary short circuit reveals something fascinating about the inner workings of the mind. Under normal conditions, the brain very precisely separates what is happening now from what has already been experienced. It does this to maintain the continuity of experience so that you feel that life flows logically. In déjà vu, this separation fails for an instant. The information arrives but the label is wrong. Instead of new, the brain marks it as memory. This process doesn't create a complete false memory with details and context. What emerges is only a feeling of familiarity without associated content. That's why when someone tries to remember when this happened before, they find nothing. There's no stored previous scene. There's only the powerful impression of repetition. This difference is subtle, but crucial to understanding why déjà vu is neither a lost memory nor a prediction of the future. What's most intriguing is that the brain doesn't immediately correct this error. It sustains the sensation for a few seconds because it trusts its own internal signals. This interval is enough to generate emotional impact, confusion, and even a slight unease. It's as if the mind were saying, "This has already happened," and consciousness were responding, "But I know it hasn't." This tension between certainty and doubt is what makes déjà vu so striking. This short circuit doesn't happen by chance. It usually arises during moments of cognitive overload, mental fatigue, stress, or excessive stimuli. Under these conditions, the brain prioritizes speed over absolute precision. It makes quick decisions to conserve energy. Most of the time this works perfectly. But occasionally this strategy comes at a price. A small labeling error that transforms the present into the past. This revelation completely changes how déjà vu should be viewed. Instead of being a sign of serious failure, it reveals itself as a natural byproduct of a highly efficient system. A system that processes thousands of pieces of information per second and, precisely for that reason, accepts a minimal margin of inaccuracy. The impact of déjà vu doesn't come from the error itself, but from the fact that we rarely have access to these inner workings. When this inner workings become visible, even for just a few seconds, something changes in our perception. The feeling of absolute control over our own minds is shaken. We realize that what we call now is a delicate construct, sustained by invisible neural decisions. And this realization can be uncomfortable, but also profoundly revealing. It exposes a hidden truth about how we live. We trust our brains without questioning until the moment they surprise us. This momentary error also sheds light on how we construct meaning. The brain doesn't just register the world, it interprets, organizes, and creates a coherent narrative of experience. Déjà vu is a tear in this narrative, a point where the story seems to repeat itself for no reason. And when this happens, we are forced to confront the fragility of this coherence. There's something almost symbolic about all of this. In a daily journey marked by automatic decisions, habits, and routines, déjà vu emerges as an involuntary pause. It interrupts the flow and draws attention to the fact that not everything is as solid as it seems. Reality, as we perceive it, depends on internal processes that we rarely question. And when these processes become misaligned, even minimally, the sensation is enough to throw us off balance. This understanding has a direct impact on the mindset with which we view the human mind. Instead of seeing it as an infallible system, we begin to see it as something profoundly intelligent, but also adaptive and imperfect. This imperfection is not weakness. It is the price of flexibility, creativity, and the ability to make quick decisions in an unpredictable world. Déjà vu, therefore, is neither a supernatural warning nor an alarming glitch. It is a silent reminder that the brain is constantly interpreting time, and that this interpretation can fluctuate. It shows that the past and the present are not rigid compartments, but internally constructed categories. And when this construction becomes misaligned, even for an instant, we feel the ground of certainty tremble. This perception sets the stage for something even more interesting. Because if the brain can confuse the present with the past, this raises profound questions about how it constructs the sensation of continuous reality, about how it maintains the illusion of linearity, of logical sequence, of cause and effect. And it is precisely by exploring these more subtle mechanisms that new revelations begin to emerge. And before moving on, leave a simple sentence in the comments: "This messed with my perception." What makes déjà vu so real and intense is not just the processing error itself, but the way the brain communicates that error to consciousness. The sensation doesn't arrive as a doubt, nor as a vague hypothesis. It arrives laden with certainty. That's what's frightening. That's what's disconcerting. For a few seconds, the brain doesn't say, "This seems familiar," it affirms, "This has already happened." And this affirmation comes with an emotional weight that's difficult to ignore. The human brain is extremely sensitive to familiarity because, throughout evolution, quickly recognizing patterns meant survival. Identifying a safe place, a familiar face, or a previously experienced situation allowed for energy conservation and risk avoidance. Therefore, when the familiarity system is activated, it triggers not just a perception but an internal conviction. The body relaxes, the mind accepts, attention decreases. It's a profound sign of trust. In déjà vu, this signal is triggered out of context, but maintains the same emotional strength. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because this is where one of the most disturbing revelations about the human mind comes in. The brain doesn't separate emotion from perception. When it labels something as familiar, it activates emotional networks associated with safety, predictability, and control. Even without a real memory behind it, the feeling comes complete. That's why déjà vu doesn't seem like a simple mental confusion. It seems like a lived experience, felt, almost remembered by the body. This emotional impact creates a kind of brief internal silence. The conscious mind tries to keep up, but it's too late. It can't find explanations, it can't locate memories, it doesn't understand the origin of that certainty. And this mismatch between what is felt and what is understood generates estrangement. It's like trusting someone you know rationally you shouldn't trust, but your feelings insist on saying otherwise. Déjà vu is unsettling precisely because it breaks a silent agreement we have with our brain. We believe that what we feel is real has a concrete basis. We believe that certainty comes from experience, that conviction is born from lived experience. When déjà vu arises, this logic breaks down. The brain proves that it is capable of generating a feeling of truth without support in facts. And this profoundly impacts how we perceive our own perceptions. Many people report that, during déjà vu, they feel as if they can predict what will happen next. This impression doesn't come from a vision of the future, but from the artificial familiarity created by the brain. When something seems familiar, the mind automatically tries to anticipate the next steps, because that's how it works in real-life, repetitive situations. Even when this prediction fails seconds later, the initial feeling remains strong enough to mark the experience. This phenomenon touches on something essential to our inner journey: the trust we place in our minds. Most of the decisions you make throughout the day are based on fleeting sensations, intuitions, and automatic judgments. You feel that something is right or wrong, safe or risky, even before thinking about it. Déjà vu exposes this mechanism in a raw way, showing that emotional certainty can exist without objective support. And that's precisely why it provokes so much self-recognition. Those who have experienced déjà vu usually remember the moment vividly, even if they can't explain why. The experience leaves a mark because it shakes the structure of internal confidence. For a few seconds, you realize that the mind can create a convincing reality on its own. This perception can be uncomfortable, but also profoundly transformative. There's a hidden truth here that's rarely discussed. We don't experience the world as it is, but as the brain constructs it. Déjà vu is just one of the few moments when this construction noticeably fails. In almost every other situation, the system works so well that we never question it. But when the failure occurs, even if minimal, it reveals how much our experience depends on invisible processes. This understanding changes the mindset with which we approach emotions and certainties. It shows that feeling something intensely doesn't guarantee that it's factual. It shows that emotional impact is not synonymous with absolute truth. And this doesn't diminish the human experience. On the contrary, it makes it more complex, deeper, and more worthy of curiosity. Déjà vu, in this sense, functions as an internal mirror. It reflects how the brain creates meaning, sustains beliefs, and protects the feeling of continuity in life. When this mirror distorts for a moment, we are invited to observe more attentively. to question, to recognize that not everything that seems solid truly is. This perception doesn't have to generate fear. It can generate awareness. It can open space for a more curious and less automatic relationship with one's own mind. Understanding why déjà vu seems so real is understanding that the intensity of the experience comes from the confidence the brain places in its own signals. And when this confidence manifests out of context, the effect is powerful enough to throw us off balance. All of this paves the way for an even broader understanding of who experiences these things more frequently and for what specific reasons. Because déjà vu doesn't arise from nothing, nor does it affect everyone in the same way. There are patterns, contexts, and mental states that make this experience more likely, and it is by observing these details that new layers of this phenomenon begin to reveal themselves. If this passage resonated with you, write a word in the comments that summarizes what you felt. Recognition. When we start observing who experiences déjà vu more frequently, something interesting emerges. It's not a randomly distributed phenomenon. There are profiles, mental states, and contexts that make this experience much more likely. And this has nothing to do with something wrong with these people, but rather with how their brains are operating at that moment in their journey. People under constant stress, for example, tend to report more episodes of déjà vu. The reason is simple though not very intuitive. Stress puts the brain into energy-saving mode. It starts to speed up decisions, simplify analyses, and rely even more on mental shortcuts. Instead of examining every detail of a new experience, the mind tries to quickly fit it into already known patterns. This cognitive haste increases the chance of mislabeling, making the present seem too familiar. The impact of this is not immediate, but it accumulates silently in the background. Mental fatigue works in a similar way. When we are tired, deprived of rest, or overloaded with tasks, the brain loses some of the fine precision of its processing. It continues to function, and function very well, but with less room to revise automatic decisions. It's like driving a perfectly tuned car, but with less attention to the details of the road. Small distortions go unnoticed, and the familiarity system can be activated without the adequate support of a real memory. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because there's a crucial point that's almost never discussed: stimulus overload. We live in an environment saturated with information, images, sounds, screens, and notifications. The modern brain is constantly challenged to filter what matters and what can be ignored. To cope with this, it increasingly resorts to patterns. The more similar stimuli you encounter throughout the day, the greater the chance that the brain will confuse distinct contexts as if they were repetitions of the same event. Repetitive environments also play a part in this equation. Very similar routines, identical routes, spaces with similar structures create a perfect scenario for déjà vu. Not because you've already experienced that exact moment, but because the brain recognizes familiar fragments and puts them together into a global feeling of familiarity. The mind doesn't work with photographic precision, it works with probabilities. And when many probabilities align, the result can be this intense feeling of repetition. Another profile that frequently appears is that of people with high imagination and cognitive sensitivity. Individuals who easily create mental images, connect ideas, and perceive nuances tend to have a more associative brain. This is a huge strength for creativity, learning, and complex decision-making. But it also means that the internal comparison system is always active, cross-referencing past experiences with the present. This constant cross-referencing increases the chance of the brain activating familiarity prematurely. There is also an interesting connection with transitional states. Moments when we are between tasks, between thoughts, between levels of attention. Those instants when you are physically present but mentally scattered. The brain continues processing information, but consciousness is not fully engaged. These intermediate states create gaps in the processing, favoring small temporal misalignments that can generate déjà vu. All of this generates a strong feeling of identification because, at some level, almost everyone has experienced at least one of these conditions. Who hasn't been tired, stressed, overwhelmed, or living days that are very similar to one another? Déjà vu doesn't choose special people. It arises more easily in brains that are working intensely to cope with reality. This completely changes the narrative that the phenomenon is something rare or abnormal. This perception has a direct impact on the mindset with which we view our own internal workings. Instead of seeing déjà vu as an isolated and strange event, we begin to understand it as a reflection of the rhythm of life, daily choices, and how the brain adapts to the demands of the environment. It becomes almost a silent warning sign, not of danger but of cognitive overload. There is a hidden truth here that is worth observing calmly. The faster and more repetitive life becomes, the the more the brain relies on automatisms to keep going. These automatisms are efficient but not infallible. Déjà vu emerges as a side effect of this efficiency. A reminder that the mind is constantly balancing speed and precision, energy efficiency and fidelity to real experience. This understanding can be transformative. It invites us to look at the phenomenon with less fear and more curiosity. To realize that déjà vu is not an enemy of reason, but a natural product of a highly adaptable brain. A brain that makes thousands of decisions per minute, many of them beyond the reach of consciousness. By recognizing who experiences déjà vu most often and why, we begin to see the phenomenon as part of a larger journey of self-discovery. It reveals how context, mental state, and environment shape the way reality is perceived. And the more aware we are of this, the more attentive we become to our own internal limitations. This observation sets the stage for an even more sensitive question. When is déjà vu simply a common effect of brain function, and when might it indicate something that deserves special attention? Because, although it is mostly harmless, there are specific situations where the context changes, and understanding this difference makes all the difference. If you recognized yourself in any of these profiles, write it in the comments below. That explains a lot. When the question arises, whether déjà vu is normal or a sign that something is wrong with the brain, it is usually accompanied by apprehension. And that's understandable. After all, few experiences shake our confidence in our own minds so much. But it is precisely here that balance and scientific clarity make all the difference. In the vast majority of cases, déjà vu is completely normal. It is part of the natural functioning of a healthy, active, and highly adaptable brain. The human brain wasn't designed to be perfect in the mechanical sense of the word. It was shaped to be efficient, flexible, and fast. This means it constantly makes decisions based on probabilities, mental shortcuts, and past experiences. This model works incredibly well most of the time. Déjà vu emerges as a rare side effect of this efficiency. A small misalignment that doesn't compromise the system's health, it simply reveals how it operates behind the scenes. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because there is a hidden truth that needs to be said responsibly. Experiencing déjà vu occasionally is not a sign of illness, nor of loss of mental control, nor of progressive cognitive failure. On the contrary, people with active brains, curious, sensitive to their environment, and exposed to many stimuli tend to report this type of experience more frequently. This does not indicate fragility, but intense involvement with the surrounding reality. Science considers déjà vu a benign phenomenon when it occurs sporadically, without other associated symptoms. It leaves no lasting effects, does not alter real memory, and does not impair future decisions. The sensation comes, causes an emotional impact, and then goes away. The brain quickly regains its balance as if nothing had happened. This self-regulating capacity is one of the clearest signs of a healthy system. However, speaking honestly about the subject also requires mentioning that there are rare situations in which experiences similar to déjà vu appear in specific neurological contexts. And it's important to emphasize, rare. In some clinical conditions such as certain types of temporal lobe epilepsy, for example, intense feelings of familiarity can occur frequently and be accompanied by other signs, such as altered consciousness, prolonged confusion, or disconnection from reality. The central point here is not isolated déjà vu, but the set of symptoms. This distinction is crucial to avoid alarmism. A healthy brain can experience déjà vu without any risk. A brain that needs medical attention usually gives other clear, persistent, and progressive signs. Déjà vu on its own is not a diagnosis, nor a hidden warning that something serious is about to happen. It only gains clinical relevance when it appears out of context, with high frequency, and accompanied by broader perceptual changes. This clarity has a huge impact on the mindset of those experiencing it. Instead of interpreting déjà vu as a threat, it's possible to see it as a curious phenomenon, a side effect of mental complexity. This reduces anxiety, restores confidence, and allows one to observe their own mind with more serenity. Fear often doesn't stem from the experience itself, but from a lack of understanding about it. There's also an important aspect of the emotional journey here. When something deviates from the norm, we tend to seek extreme explanations. The human brain is an expert at creating narratives to fill in gaps. Without information, it resorts to imagination. And this can transform a common phenomenon into an unnecessary source of worry. Science comes in precisely to do the opposite, to bring context, reduce exaggerations, and return the phenomenon to its true scale. This responsible approach doesn't diminish the mystery of déjà vu. On the contrary, it makes it even more fascinating. Knowing that something as simple as a small temporal misalignment between brain systems can generate such an intense experience reminds us how delicate the construction of reality is. It shows that we live supported by invisible, extremely efficient, but not infallible processes. And that's not a reason for fear, it's a reason for admiration. By understanding that déjà vu is normal in the vast majority of cases, something changes in the way you observe your own mind. The experience ceases to be a warning sign and becomes an invitation to curiosity. A reminder that the brain is always working, always adjusting, always making decisions silently. And that, occasionally, this internal work becomes perceptible. This renewed confidence opens the door to even deeper reflection. Because if déjà vu isn't a serious mistake, but a reflection of mental functioning, it can teach us something valuable about how we deal with time, memory, and our own identity. It becomes part of a journey of self-discovery, not worry. It is from this sense of security that we can move towards a broader understanding of what déjà vu reveals about the human mind as a whole. About how we construct the sensation of continuity, how we maintain the illusion of control, and how the brain sustains the experience of now. And it is precisely at this point that new revelations begin to emerge, further amplifying the impact of this seemingly simple phenomenon. If this explanation brought you more peace of mind or clarity, leave a comment below. That made me feel more at ease. When we observe all that déjà vu reveals, it becomes clear that it is much more than a strange, fleeting sensation. It functions as a crack through which we can see something that normally remains hidden, the fragility of our perception. Not fragility in the sense of weakness, but in the sense of construction. What we call reality is not something that simply happens outside of us and enters the mind intact. Reality is constructed, interpreted, and validated by the brain every second. Most of the time, this construction is so efficient that we don't even notice the process. The mind delivers a continuous, coherent, and reliable experience. You wake up, live your day, make decisions, react to situations, all with the feeling of being fully aware of what is happening. Déjà vu emerges as a rare moment when this mechanism leaves a visible mark. A small discrepancy that reveals the silent work behind the scenes. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because this perception completely changes how we understand truth, certainty, and control. When we experience déjà vu, the brain proves it is capable of creating a sense of reality without a corresponding event in the external world. The experience is internal, but the impact is real. Emotions are activated, convictions arise, the body reacts. All this happens even when logic dictates there is no basis for it. This forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Feeling something as real does not guarantee that it is true. This revelation has a direct impact on our everyday mindset. How often do we rely on intuitions, quick judgments, and emotional certainties without questioning their origin? Déjà vu shows that these sensations don't arise from nothing, but they are not infallible either. They are efficient constructs shaped to help us navigate life, not to deliver a perfect copy of reality. The brain prioritizes functionality, not absolute precision. There is something profoundly transformative in this understanding. It invites us to adopt a more curious stance toward our own minds. Instead of assuming that everything we perceive is a faithful reflection of the world, we begin to see perception as an active interpretation. A constantly updated narrative. Déjà vu is a brief yet powerful reminder that this narrative can become distorted, and that this is part of the normal functioning of the human mind. This perceptual fragility also explains why déjà vu has such a strong emotional impact. It shakes the foundation of our inner confidence. During the experience, we realize that what seems solid can falter. That time can seem to double. That the present can be confused with the past. This momentary break in expectation is not merely cognitive, it is existential. It touches on how we understand who we are and how we situate ourselves in the world. At the same time, there's something fascinating about all this. The fact that perception is constructed means that it can be observed, questioned, and understood. Déjà vu offers us a rare glimpse of this process in action. It shows that the mind is not a mirror but an artisan. A system that selects, organizes, and gives meaning to the chaos of stimuli that surrounds us. And, like any complex system, it can exhibit minor flaws without losing its integrity. This understanding broadens the journey of self-discovery. We begin to realize that many decisions, emotions, and reactions are guided by automatic processes that never reach consciousness. Déjà vu is not a threat to this dynamic, it is a clue. A momentary revelation of how the brain constructs the sensation of continuity, identity, and presence. It shows that the now is a delicately sustained experience, not an absolute given. There is a hidden truth here that is worth considering beyond the phenomenon itself. If perception can be so convincing even when it is mistaken, to what extent are our daily certainties also not comfortable interpretations? To what extent is what we feel as obvious merely the result of quick and silent neural decisions? Déjà vu doesn't answer these questions, but it creates the space for them to exist. And perhaps that is the greatest impact of the phenomenon. It doesn't give us ready-made answers but invites us to think more deeply, to question the relationship between mind and reality, to recognize that living is, to a large extent, about trusting an extraordinary internal system, and accepting that it doesn't need to be perfect to be reliable. Déjà vu shows that the human mind is powerful precisely because it is flexible, adaptable, and creative. When this perception sets in, something changes in the way we observe our own experience. The world doesn't lose meaning, it gains layers. Each sensation begins to be seen as part of a larger construction, a continuous journey of interpretation. Déjà vu ceases to be just a strange event and transforms into a symbol of this complexity. A silent reminder that the reality we live in is, above all, a perceived reality. And as we conclude this exploration, an open question remains, one that continues to echo even after the thought moves forward. If your mind is capable of creating such a real sensation without a concrete basis, how much of what you call certainty today is, in fact, an invisible construct in constant adjustment? If this thought resonated with you, leave a comment below. That makes sense to me. If you've made it this far, it's because this topic truly resonated with you on some level. And that says a lot. If it made sense, sparked your curiosity, or if you recognized yourself in these experiences at any point, it's worth subscribing to the channel. The idea here is to continue exploring these themes calmly, in depth, and with respect for the intelligence of those who are watching. If you'd like, leave a comment saying you made it to the end. You can write something simple like, "I'm with you until the end," or, "This message was for me. I read," and that helps keep this space alive, a space for real exchange, not just information. And if you felt that connection throughout the video, leave a like too. It's a silent way of saying that this type of content is worth continuing to exist and reaching more people who like to better understand their own minds. There's a video over there that complements this topic and delves even deeper into how the brain constructs reality. Click there and continue reading.